Marijuana seems like every time I go to any news source, I just hear new things about another state legalizing it.
Oh yeah, for both medical and recreational purposes. So.
Yeah, and I think people are more interested in this topic now than ever, just with the potential good things and also the many potential bad things. So marijuana, it's a plant. It's a plant with 85 different cannabinoids in it.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, there's so many.
It's crazy.
So these are basically just molecules that are called cannabinoids. There's certain things of their molecular structure that make them cannabinoids, but that's where the name cannabis comes from.
Are all the cannabinoids like present in the same levels in the different plants? Like, does their expression differ?
I think it does in certain plants, because I know like the main marijuana plant has THC, which is the psychoactive chemical that people talk about a lot with marijuana.
Right.
And it also has CBD, which is kind of the more anti-anxiety, relaxing chemical.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people take that to like before bed to calm down.
Yeah, a lot of people will talk about hemp, and hemp is one of the marijuanas that only has CBD in it. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have that psychoactive property.
Right.
It's at very low levels if it's in there, but it just really highly expresses CBD cannabinoid.
How do these cannabinoids affect our body?
Yeah, so our body has like certain receptors that respond to these cannabinoids. So there's the CB1 receptors, and these are found in the brain, and there's the CB2 receptors, which are found more in like the immune and nervous system. But what's really interesting if we compare THC and CBD, those two main components of marijuana, they have the same amount of atoms and they basically look the same, but THC binds to the CB1 in the brain, and that's where all that psychoactivity comes from, whereas CBD can only bind to the CB2 receptors more in the immune system, so that's where that relaxation.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So is the CB2 receptor is mostly expressed in the immune system, and it's not in the brain?
Yeah, it's not in the brain. Cool. So that's kind of where like these compounds have such different effects, even though they're so similar. It's just based on how they can bind to these receptors.
Right.
As of now, medical marijuana is legal in 28 states and then recreationally in 8 states.
That's crazy. Like, how recent is that?
I think it's in the past like 2 or 3 years.
Because it's been fast.
Yeah, because I know with the recreational marijuana, like that's been really recent.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has come out of the National Academy of Sciences. They did a huge report on cannabis because they were seeing how a lot of people are using it for medical purposes, even if it was illegal, and then also for recreational. And they had people on this committee from psychology, neuroscience, pharmacology, toxicology, epidemiology, children's medicine. So they tried to like put this committee together with all kind of the experts in their fields and like experts from many different fields to kind of get the full gambit of what they should be looking at. So the main reason they kind of put this committee together was to find some accepted standards, especially in the context of pregnant women and adolescents, the adolescents are really into smoking that weed.
Right.
So they wanted to kind of define if there are some dosages to look at, or if, like, in looking at all the studies that have been done on marijuana, what is kind of accepted or what has been shown.
Right, because when a drug passes through FDA trials, we do all these kinds of studies on dosages, but with this, substance that was illegal, we just haven't looked at any of those.
And a lot of scientists aren't even able to get access to marijuana because it's under this kind of like drug law, and that if you want to use it, you have to go through tons of hoops and hurdles and really define what you're going to use it for, which is good, but it also has like made it so there's not a lot of research done. But this committee, they did a literature search of cannabis related papers and ended up reviewing about 10,700 abstracts.
Wow.
To kind of look at their findings.
That's crazy to me that there were even that many, because it just seemed like the attitude of all my colleagues and stuff is that it's under research, so I'm surprised there's even that many.
And I mean, I think they had to definitely go through and cull some of those because just the different research standards and dosages, and with marijuana too, since there's no like specific clinical use for it yet, people haven't like made a clinical grade marijuana that everyone can look at.
Right.
So you could be getting those batch effects that we mentioned with the essential oils video. But in this report that's 500 pages long, and I read quite a bit of it, I was kind of curious too. They break it down into like the background of cannabis, the therapeutic effects that are actually found in basic science research, and then they also talk about some of the epidemiological research about smoked cannabis specifically, since there's many different ways to take cannabis.
So what did they find?
So that first they got into the recommendations based off of the results. I think they wanted people to see what we need to do versus like what we can use it for first. So they said one of the biggest things is just examining the health effects of marijuana and focusing on youth, older people, pregnant women. I mean, I feel like giving pregnant women marijuana is not a good idea anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how they're going to focus on that. Maybe mice and see. They also want to make research standards, so like minimum data set you need in order to publish on marijuana, and also just some research terminologies too. One of the big things for them was determining the pharmacokinetics, which is basically how cannabis will bind in the body, in both THC and CBD, how they'll bind in the body, and how quickly they'll bind, and how quickly you like reach the half-life of the molecule, because that can really affect how it's acting in the body.
Right. And how much you want to give people.
They also want to do better like health surveys, because as you kind of mentioned before, if we're talking about an illegal substance, no one really wants to fess up and say that they're using it, even if it's for science purposes.
Right.
And from here, they also want to get to some clinical trials as well with marijuana, which kind of, when we get to the results, it will make sense why. And they also want to focus on making research-grade cannabis.
Right.
And to do this, they said they want to identify non-traditional funding sources, so basically funding marijuana, but not from the government, which I found highly amusing, because it shows that they still think there's some stigma behind it, which there is. What the report kind of said was that they kind of broke it down into evidence that's pretty conclusive, evidence that's slightly conclusive, evidence that's not very conclusive. So they didn't make any super blanket statements of, oh, this helps with this, which I think is really important to define.
Right.
But some of the conclusive or substantial evidence that they found was that cannabis can be used to treat chronic pain, and it can really help with chemotherapy-induced vomiting and multiple sclerosis, which kind of makes sense because these are all like really high-stressed, high-inflammation sort of conditions.
Yeah, so soothing your immune system. I guess it must be kind of hard to, since none of these are like clinical studies, I'm sure these, like, especially someone with MS is probably taking other medicine too, so it was probably hard to separate the effect of cannabis from what else is going on in their life.
For sure, because I don't think any of these studies, it was just like, just take cannabis, unless they, and even then you could still have some stuff left in your system as well. But they also saw some moderate evidence that cannabis can be used to help with like sleep-related disorders and help people fall asleep, especially with like fibromyalgia and kind of restless leg syndrome. And with people with psychotic disorders, they saw that taking cannabis actually helped with kind of just day-to-day like brain function.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've also heard that, I haven't looked at the evidence, but I've heard like anecdotally that smoking, a lot of people like with schizophrenia smoke to soothe the disorder.
Yeah, definitely. But they actually, for schizophrenia, they said they saw a limited use of like cannabis helping schizophrenia.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which I found interesting because that was one of the things I heard as well. But I mean, a lot of it goes back to who they're looking at, what their previous history is.
What kind, is it CBD or THC? Or
Yeah, exactly. Because so many of the different, like if you are smoking marijuana or even taking different foods with marijuana in it, like they'll have different doses of CBD or THC.
So what about anxiety?
They actually kind of showed limited evidence for it helping anxiety.
That's surprising.
Which really surprised me.
That's like the number one thing that I hear from people, that it helps with anxiety.
And I didn't really go and look and see if those specific anxiety studies were THC or CBD, but I hear so many people using CBD before bed, and it's super helpful in falling asleep. And another thing that they found was that cannabis isn't really helpful for cancer or irritable bowel syndrome or Huntington's disease, just based on the literature that they reviewed. So I'd say from this like Academy report, they really just want more research.
Yeah.
Because they can't really conclude anything like very strongly because of the research that's been done and how it's hard sometimes to compare research study to research study if they're using different dosages and different groups of people.
Different strains. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Rachel, I'm sure you've heard of Malcolm Gladwell.
Ah, yes, tipping point outliers.
He's one of those controversial journalists from, I think it's New York Times. And he just loves to write about controversial issues and kind of get people fired up. He recently wrote a post about marijuana, and that's kind of what spurred on this video. And he claimed from another book that cannabis usage is associated with more violence than alcohol. And the book that he referenced this from looked at this observational study of 12,000 teenagers to see like how much cannabis use or alcohol usage could predict violence. And they saw a positive correlation with cannabis usage being associated with violence. And as we scientists know, correlation
is not causation.
No, it's not. But Gladwell in his article kind of argues that marijuana usage can expose something in someone. And he gave like an anecdotal piece of evidence of going and talking to this guy in a jail, and the guy said when he had an edible, he went and shot his wife, and now that's why he's in jail.
We've all probably heard that like marijuana use can make you more paranoid. So is this paranoia bring out the violence in people?
Right. And is it like a genetics environment thing that's just been hiding away, and then marijuana is the tipping point for that?
Or are they just outliers?
Yeah. You never know. So his article, one of the biggest things with it is he looked also at this report from the National Academy of Sciences. And he said he went and read it. But I wanted to read one of the conclusions from the report and how he actually reworded it in his article, because it was very interesting and very telling as to how he's doing his reporting. So the conclusion from the report is: there is substantial evidence of a statistical association between cannabis use and the development of schizophrenia and other psychoses, with the highest risk among the most frequent users. And this is how Gladwell reports it. As the National Academy panel declared, in one of its few unequivocal conclusions, cannabis use is likely to increase the risk of developing schizophrenia and other psychoses. The greater the use, the greater the risk.
Interesting wording.
When I read that, I don't think, oh, unequivocal conclusion.
Yeah. Also, adding the word increase, so one is now causing the other.
Yeah. So his article, a lot of people were angry about it for good reason, because he did a lot of extrapolation in the article and didn't really back it up with conclusive evidence or cherry-picked from the National Academy report.
Yeah. I mean, something like violence, that's a multi-dimensional trait. I mean, lots of things go into violence. Like, we know that you may have genetic proclivities towards that, and it can run in a family. We know that it has a lot to do with your environment. So to pull out this one thing and say, this is causing you to be more violent.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so much else.
I think one of the articles that I read was like talking about Gladwell's article and saying that one of the studies done was in, I don't remember the city, but it was one of the first places to legalize marijuana usage, and the violence rate had gone up like 40% or something. But something else that had changed was the income inequality had also changed in that area. So
yeah, I think that was in that teen study.
Yes.
So the backbone of this other guy's work was this study, and then just showing what else is going on during that time in that area.
Right.
But I think with marijuana, just in general, basically from the National Academy reading, we need more research. And hopefully with things being legalized, a little bit more scientists can get a hold of some marijuana for research purposes and be able to start to uncover the molecular mechanisms of how it's working, and especially like the dosages.
And the route that you're taking it, because I mean, I have a lot of friends that do like lung research on e-cigs and cigarettes. We had Jael come in and talk about e-cigs, and we don't know what like smoking marijuana is doing to your lungs.
Right.
So.
But on the flip side, people are excited about the legalization of marijuana because they say it's a better treatment for pain than opioids. And it's not, you don't get addicted to marijuana in the same way that you get addicted to opioids. Right.